Como hemos visto a lo largo de este ciclo de conferencias, existen múltiples agendas que están vinculadas e interrelacionadas. Por esta razón, se ha conformado un grupo de trabajo para crear un nuevo marco de referencia, el Task Force on Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. Esta conferencia es traída por Banorte, Premier Partner y patrocinador de este evento. Para moderar este diálogo nos acompaña Marius Calvet, directora de sustentabilidad e inversión responsable en Grupo Financiero Banorte, quien también es consejera general del CSFB, además de ser miembro del TNFD. Bienvenida, Marius, y nos encantará contar con tu moderación.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Green Finance Advisory Board event from Mexico. We are here with Odile Conchu. She is the financial sector focal point from the Convention of Biological Diversity, and she's also the shepherd of Elizabeth Berema, who is the co-chair of the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. So the topic today, having the honor of having Odile today here with us to talk about the new framework, the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. We welcome you to our event in Mexico. We are very excited to listen to you talk about nature-related risk and the new framework that has already been launched. So welcome, Odile. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Marius, and good morning, everyone. I would really like to be with you in Mexico rather than in Montreal, where it snows today. So thank you for inviting me at the MX21 conference on sustainable finance to exchange with you, Marius, on the task force on nature-related financial disclosure. Before I talk about the TNFD, let me come back to the institutional context and the challenging but also roaring period that we are all living in, and I guess several speakers talked about it yesterday. We are at a crucial moment for climate and biodiversity, for our planet, and for all of us. At a global policy level, the two COPs, Conference of Parties, the COP21 in October in China, COP for biodiversity, and the COP26 on climate change in Glasgow last month, demonstrated as never before that climate change and nature are interconnected and that we will not solve the climate crisis without nature and the biodiversity crisis without addressing climate change. They also highlighted the social challenges of this crisis and the fact that people, local community and indigenous people have to be part of the solutions. And that was more or less new. So we all know now that our global economy is highly dependent of nature and that nature loss represents significant financial risks to organizations and financial institutions. There has been a lot of reports. One, for example, the World Economic Forum in 2020 ranked biodiversity loss and ecosystem collapse as one of the top 5 risks in the next 10 years. And climate change was one of the others. So the risks of inaction are immense, but the opportunities on the other side from action are equally huge. It was mentioned several times during both COPs, the involvement of all actors besides governments, including businesses and the public and private financial sector across developed and emerging markets is fundamental. It's now clear for climate change, not yet or not enough for biodiversity. One of the issues is that most financial institutions and corporates currently have a low understanding of how their operations or investments impact or depend on nature, and therefore to what extent they are exposed to nature-related risks. That's where the TNFD appears, because it will address this information gap by increasing transparency. The framework it develops will help corporates and financial institutions to understand, identify, and assess the risks associated with their dependencies and impacts on nature, and also the opportunities in order to support the shift in global financial flows away from nature negative and towards nature positive outcomes. This task force is chaired by Elizabeth Berema, She's the executive secretary of the UN Convention of Biological Diversity, as you said, Marius, just before, and I am working with her, and also by David Craig, who is the former CEO of Referencia and strategic advisor to the London Stock Exchange. The TNFD is developed by the market for the market in collaboration with public development banks and other stakeholders and experts in the biodiversity field. It will build upon the structure and foundation of the TCFD, so that's the same thing, but for climate. It appeared after the COP21. And over time, the two frameworks will be complementary. The TNFD will deliver a risk management and disclosure framework for financial institutions and organizations by 2023. But we speak a lot of nature-related risk, but finally, what does it mean? It refers to the risk and opportunities to an organization posed by the linkages between its activities and nature. In addition to shorter-term financial risks, which are deemed material today, this includes longer-term risks represented by its impact and dependencies on nature. The task force consists of 34 senior executives from financial institutions, corporate and market service provider, and Marius, you are one of them, supported by the TNFD Secretariat and external experts. They are currently working on the definition of nature-related risk, data availability, standards, and metrics. They are developing a beta framework that should be ready by the end of Q1 2022, February or March next year, and pilots will test the framework on different sectors. The first will be on soybean crops. The TNFD Alliance, the broader network, also includes a TNFD forum, which is a global and multidisciplinary consultative network of institutional supporters who share the vision and mission of the TNFD. It has over 250 members now and can integrate more members. So if you are interested, you can join this forum to be better informed first and also to participate to this important work. I stop here, and I think, Marius, you have some questions for me. Thank you all.
Absolutely, Odile. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction and also for linking to the topic of climate, which has been broadly spoken about in the conference these days that we are having. So I do have a question for you, and you did mention how financial institutions and corporate have a low understanding on the topic of nature-related risk and also an information gap on this topic. So my first question would be around, would you say those are, or which are, the main challenges that financial institutions and companies face in order to actually understand how nature impacts their organization's immediate financial performance or the longer-term financial risks that may arise from how the organization positively or negatively impacts nature? So what would be those challenges for financial institutions and corporations to identify, to assess, to measure and report nature-related risks?
As we both said, there is a real lack of understanding of what nature risks are, but perhaps also of how it functions, nature, and why it's so important for the economy. We all know or heard that nature is providing us services for free. And finally, because it's free, nobody cares more, if I can say, about that. But we all rely on nature and services that ecosystem provides us for free, as food, the first one, water purification, air quality, carbon sequestration, soil stabilization, coastal protection, recreation, cultural values, and so on. And the OECD estimated the amount of these services to 125 to 140 trillion per year, which is huge, 1.5 times the size of global GDP. So you can imagine that if these services disappear, either it's too late or it has to be replaced by what? And that's a huge amount of money, so a huge amount of assets who could be stranded asset or who could disappear more or less. So we begin to see what is the materiality of the risk when we say that. So first of all, perhaps better understanding that and be helped or trained to better understand that. The second thing that we very often hear and see also, I used to work in a bank before, is the lack of data. But not a lack of scientific data, because there are a lot of scientific data on the ground, but a lack of easily accessible and usable data by financial institutions. I think there is something as a translation to do. A lack also of main guidance. The 1.5 degree for climate was a huge guidance for a lot of companies and banks and so on, even if the way to achieve that was not clear, and it's perhaps to be defined. We saw yet also we saw that at the COP26. But for biodiversity, we don't have that. The global biodiversity framework, which will be released at the COP15 next year, will give more explanation on that, and will give some metrics and targets, and that's really useful. And a place has to be made for the financial institutions also in this general guidance. And I would add a lack of useful partnerships, because what we see in all the financial institutions where things happen now more and more with biodiversity is that very often in the pioneers, if I can say, they are working with NGOs or experts in order to better know what to do with biodiversity, because it's much more complex than climate. So I would say that these are the main challenging, and after that we can speak of what they can do, but it's not concretely your question.
Thank you very much, Odile. And now if we move forward to actually land on this new framework, which is actually the main topic of our conversation today, we have spoken about the business case for nature-related risk, how to find the financial materiality for financial institutions and organizations to actually identify, assess, measure, and report on these topics. So we have spoken about the why. So I would love to land here with you, with your such an important role and closeness to Elizabeth Marema, the co-chair of the TNFD, and David Craig, on the how. How will the TNFD help to integrate nature-related risk and opportunities into decision-making? And actually, what we really try to achieve is to shift the flows of capital towards nature-positive outcomes and away from nature degradation. So how would the TNFD would achieve this?
Yeah, the TNFD, that's a framework that will allow the financial institution and corporate to disclose on their nature-related risk, but not only to disclose, to assess, find solution, and after that disclose. Because you can't disclose if you don't do the two first steps. So first of all, it will help to better, and what we said before, to better understand what it is concretely, this nature-related risk, impact, and dependencies of banks, funds, and corporate on nature, and also what are the opportunities, what could be a new market, and so on. For that, as I said, the experts are now working on data metrics and so on. They are looking, and they will provide an overview of data availability, quality, and gaps by surveying the existing data landscape and see where things are perhaps missing. And the same thing on metrics, targets, and standards by surveying also this landscape. The idea is absolutely not to develop new targets, new standards, but first to analyze what exists, identify gaps, as I said before, and if necessary, work with relevant agencies, specialized one, to complete this landscape and provide that to the financial institution and corporate. So that's more transparency, more tools, more help. The third perhaps things is to provide very quick, as I said, a beta, very quick, in March or February or March next year, a beta framework. So the beta framework, that will be the main form of the framework that will help to organize the thinking and the better understanding of risk and opportunity associated with nature to the financial institution and corporate by identifying gaps in governance, in strategy, in management, and in disclosure that they have in their organization, and also to gauge or to assess the current risk of their portfolio. So it's more or less the model of the TCFD, but adapted, because it has to be adapted, that's a bit different, to nature. For example, it will enable financial institutions to assess these famous impacts and dependencies of their portfolio and to help them to make choices. And as you say, to reallocate capital towards nature neutral or positive businesses, or perhaps to stop also to finance some assets. It's sometimes difficult to say, but you have also to make choices, and the evolution of the regulation and international framework and so on will also perhaps oblige or push some institution to say we don't finance anymore this type of asset because it's so negative on biodiversity. The same if we compare with coal or in the climate area. It can also help corporates to assess their supply chains to once again reduce their exposure to impact and dependencies, and to reallocate the same thing as the resources to more nature positive suppliers this time. And this beta framework will then be sector specific. So you will have, yes, per sector or per main sector, this framework adapted. And pilots will be developed. So in order first to test that and to also see how it can work in different type of sector. It's related to what I said before. As I said before, the soybean crops will be the first one. Other will follow, and the forum, and that means other institutions and the 34 that I mentioned before, can participate in this testing. And I think it's could be really, really interesting for a lot of financial institutions and corporate to be part of that.
Adil, thank you very much. I think that our audience could not have had someone as experienced and as knowledgeable on the topic of nature-related risk. We will follow what will happen on the second part of the Convention of Biological Biodiversity. We'll be attentive of the goals that come up from there. And I actually call on our audience to follow this pipeline of events or timeline that the TNFD has. There is a website, www.tnfd.info, and there's also on social media, on LinkedIn and Twitter, a page for the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosures. So we are really grateful, Odile, that you came here to explain about the business case, the challenges of nature-related risks for organizations and financial institutions, and what is the TNFD and what will it achieve and how. So to close, I really just want to thank you, Odile, and to say a phrase that I have heard from our co-chairs of the TNFD, Elizabeth Merema and David Craig, that if we are willing and trying to achieve net zero by 2050, we will never achieve net zero if we are not nature positive. So we should focus on this topic. It's a linked agenda. So thank you very much, Odile, for being here with us.
Thank you, Marius, and thank you to invite me to MX21. Bye-bye.